Okay, so my name is Zahid Mahmood. Again, thank you everybody for joining, and welcome to today's webinar, courtesy of the British Institute of Recruiters. Today's webinar will be having a discussion on the 10 biggest mistakes causing EPA failure. So we'll have a little bit of a countdown, maybe like the top of the pops. I don't know. We'll have to see what mood Matt's in today. So we'll see if we can do something like they used to do back in the day in the top of the pops, the top 10. So presenters today will be myself. I'm the Business Development Manager at the British Institute of Recruiters for the Endpoint Assessment, and my colleague Matt Allison Griffiths, who's one of our senior EPA assessors, and some of you already would have had the pleasure of working with Matt as well. Today's webinar, merely an opportunity to sort of share best practice and ideas, and sort of, we'd sort of welcome any questions through the chat box or any questions as we're going through the webinar. And there will be some time at the end to ask questions as well. And as I mentioned previously, a copy of the webinar will be sent out after the call. It'll also be on our YouTube channel as well. So without any further ado, what I'm going to do firstly is I'm going to share my screen, if I may. Screen share. Okay, so I hope you can all see my screen there.
Yes, I can see your screen nice and clear there, Zach.
Excellent. Good morning, Matt.
Yes, good morning to everyone as well.
Good stuff. So I'll hand over to you, Matt. You can sort of begin and stuff.
Yes. So good morning, everyone. Obviously, the main point of our webinar today is just to bring to light some of the 10 biggest mistakes that can cause EPA failure. Both Zach and I have direct experience with some of these mistakes, as well as having some very good information for you to help remedy these mistakes and prevent them from happening in the first place. So, Zach, if we could move to the first slide, please.
First slide, yeah.
There we are. So, one of the first things I want to talk about is the failure to prepare a learner for a professional discussion. A lot of the time, we experience learners who will be very nervous and they won't actually understand the concept of a professional discussion and how that's meant to take place. So a lot of the time they will be very sort of stagnant in their answers. They'll be hesitant to talk on. Occasionally they'll sort of provide very short sentences or one-word answers whenever you try to develop the professional discussion. And what we've narrowed this down to is the fact that most learners think a professional discussion is a question and answer session. Now, we don't know whether this has been brought in by sort of common misconceptions or whether it's been through the learner's learning journey, where any professional discussions that they may have had with their trainer or tutor is more of a Q&A session rather than an actual real professional discussion. In addition to that, whenever we're doing a professional discussion, the learners seem to, on occasion anyway, the ones that are struggling, not necessarily understand the points in which they're meant to discuss. So, for instance, a learner will possibly talk about something that they've done as part of their CPD log, but they'll be very sort of matter of fact and very short. Oh yes, I did X for my CPD log because I needed to. Now, in terms of a professional discussion, this doesn't give us very much information at all. Usually we're looking for sort of 5 separate elements within a professional discussion, particularly when we're discussing topics such as the CPD log, where, you know, we want to understand why the learner chose that particular CPD activity, what they hoped to achieve from it, what they actually did in order to achieve that particular activity, and then in conclusion to that, what they actively learned and how that's improved themselves or their performance within their job role, and finally reflecting back on it, how they would like to see a lot more people do these sorts of activities and how they could think of better ways of implementing what they've learned throughout their business or throughout their colleagues. So it's just in those sorts of scenarios where, you know, a learner who's going to be very matter of fact and short with an answer, particularly during a professional discussion, they're really going to lose out, and they're not going to be able to bring across a lot of the critical information that we need from them regarding certain topics. So again, just to reiterate, a lot of the learners think that it's a Q&A session, and a lot of the learners don't know the points in which they're discussing, treating them more as sort of a, oh, this is a question, here's my answer, rather than explaining that particular topic or that point. All right. So Zach, if we could move on to the next slide there. I just want to remind everyone that if you do have any questions, please to put them into the chat box so that we can run through these questions for everyone at the end. Zach, I'll hand over to you for this next part here as well.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Yeah, so we're coming in at number 9 now. So what we find is, and I've certainly picked up on this whilst invigilating quite a lot of the knowledge tests, certainly in the first lockdown, where everything was removed to remote, basically remote examination invigilation. We now have our remote proctoring process where we sort of go through a few protocols with the learner at the beginning of their test, and then they take their test. What we find is that, you know, learners are sort of breaking the speed record every single time in terms of competing with each other to know who sort of finished the test in the earliest time. And, you know, sometimes it could be the difference between a pass and a distinction or a merit and a distinction. So really, you know, learners not really thinking about the knowledge test. It's a multiple choice test. You have a question for answers, and it's really thinking about and eliminating the ones that are least likely to match what's on the description of the question, and they're sort of speeding through really. You know, as I mentioned, sometimes it could be the difference between a pass and a distinction, sometimes between a merit and a distinction, and you know, we're finding on average, I would say, 22 minutes, a learner's sort of finished their knowledge test. On the business administration and team leader EPA standards, we allow 60 minutes for the learners to complete their knowledge test, and on the Ops Departmental Manager Level 5, we allow 90 minutes to complete 30 questions. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So, you know, I mean, we're not talking about the mass population of learners not getting distinctions in knowledge tests, but we are certainly talking about, you know, maybe the 4 or 5% that sort of rush through and sort of you know, just miss a distinction because he got a pass when they could have got a distinction, etc. So yeah, that's sort of certainly one of my reasons. That's coming at number 9, so quite high on the list there. I'll move on to the next slide now.
Just before we move on there, Zach, I just wanted to add in for everyone. A lot of the time with the learners, particularly when they're speeding through the multiple choice test, is the way that they read the questions. A lot of the time, a learner can misread a question, think that they're answering right, and then move through to the next question. And this is where a lot of them tend to fall short, is because they're not taking the time to read the questions thoroughly. You know, answering quickly isn't a problem. It's the reading through the question where a lot of the problems start to happen. So long as the learners take their time and read through the questions thoroughly, that mitigates a lot of the sort of mistakes that stereotypically tend to happen when someone's speeding through something such as the knowledge test.
Yeah, good point. That's a good point, Matt. Okay, I'll just move on to the next slide. So at number 8, we're coming on to talking about the consultative project. Now, this is more related to the HR support and HR consultant EPA standard, whereby a lot of the learners are struggling with the consultative project. So I just wanted to go over a few points with regards to this. I believe we are currently revising our resources on the HR standards as we speak, and you know, one of the things that we do at Gateway now for the HR standards is for the learner to submit a project brief for the consultative project, and that goes a long way in terms of deciding whether the project that the learner will end up doing will be a good project and they'll be on the right lines, or it's not a good project and they're not on the right lines, so to speak. You know, for them to go away and maybe think about maybe another topic or another project and sort of submit that project synopsis instead, or to improve on the one that they've got. And really, at Gateway, we don't want to be putting anybody through Gateway that has got a project where, you know, they're clearly not on the right lines. They'll end up doing a 3,000 or a 5,000 word consultative project, and just fail it and just fail the whole EPA. So that's the point of having the project brief at Gateway, so that the independent endpoint assessor is allowed to look at that project brief, and you know, the sort of minimum that we will do is just say yes, you know, the learner's on the right lines, and we'll sort of approve the project synopsis, or you know, we'll say no, you know, they're not on the right lines, and therefore we've sort of rejected it, and it's for them to go away and sort of rethink it, and so on and so forth. You know, one of the ways that they can do that is sort of have a clear structure, and maybe break the word count down into different components, such as a scope could be 500 words, and so on and so forth. And then like that, it's sort of the consultative project is sort of broken. It's sort of broken down. So I believe we are going to do a template, or we have done a template now, whereby there's a clearer structure for the HR support and HR consultative projects, where everything's sort of broken down in our resources pack. The words for the HR support level 3, it is 3,000 words maximum, and 5,000 words for the HR consultant. But these do not include the appendices. So whatever's in the appendices is completely independent of what's in the main body of the consultative project, which is good to know. It's good clarification from the EQA that the learners are allowed to portray extra evidence in the appendices, and that will not be included in the word count for the consultative project. Also, it's probably a good idea for the learners to be able to to be given an example of what a good consultative project is, as opposed to a bad one, or what's a pass project and what's a distinction project. So essentially they know sort of what's really expected of them, really. It's one of the areas that we have found in the whole of the EPAs that we do, where learners are struggling. But we are giving as an EPAO, we are giving quite a lot of support. Like I said, we have a look at the project synopsis, and we do a practical session with the training provider and the tutors to go through things like what a good consultative project is, what can be included, etc. So we do a lot of collaboration with our clients, etc. Any sort of questions on that one? Okay.
Just before we move on there, Zach, I also wanted to add in with regards to the structure of the consultative project. We have typically seen in the past submissions that are more similar to an essay rather than a project, as it were. And I think this is where we've been working on this clear structure idea, and hopefully this template will be available soon, because with an essay, it's very easy for the learners to glaze over important parts of their project, etc. Whereas if they have this clear broken down structure, it allows them to be a lot more specific, and immediately when they read back over or go back over their work before submitting it, it'll be very apparent whether or not they've been light in an area, or left some things out, or not been as clear as what they would like to be. Yeah.
That template is now on the resources, as I believe. I'm just going to switch screens here. I'm just going to very quickly just switch screens here and just show the resource there. So we've got the template here for the consultative project. So these are the headings for the consultative project, with the learner being able to sort of choose one of these 7 topics. There's some guidelines there, and then the project report template is broken down into the knowledge, their skills. They can plan the scope of the project, etc. So we've got the templates are broken down here, and learners are finding this a lot more easier now. And some skills there, S2.1, S2.2, and so on and so forth. So it's on there. It's in the resources section now, for those of you. And I know there's a few colleges on today that were with us for the HR standards. So it's sort of on there and stuff. Okay. So now I'll move on to the next one then, Matt. So we're coming in at now number 6.
Yeah. Here we go. So one of the things that we are looking at, particularly for the new standards that are due to come in, is both the learner and the assessor having access to that portfolio when doing the professional discussion. So in particular, as covered in our previous webinars, when we come to do the professional discussions underneath the new standards, having their portfolio in front of them and having access to all of that during the professional discussion is going to be substantially more beneficial for them, because not only do they have an excellent set of reference material that they can look at, remind themselves exactly what they did during that process, but also the assessor can now see exactly what they're seeing as well. So there could be a particular working example that the learner wishes to discuss, and they could say, oh, hold on, this is on evidence 7 in my portfolio. This was the situation that happened that day. And they would then be able to discuss through exactly what that situation was, what they were able to gather from the initial start of that situation, what actions they were going to take, what they decided to do in terms of implementing those actions, what to do if anything went wrong, and then reflecting back on that situation, thinking, right, how well did it go? What can I do afterwards to make sure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again, or what can I do next time to make it better? These sorts of things will be crucial for the learners, particularly as the standards move over to the new set. And a lot of the time, as we previously discussed for the professional discussions, the learners aren't keeping this sort of information fresh in their minds, or they don't have any sort of reference to what they did other than their sort of CPD log as an example. But moving forward, when we're talking about more active working examples, this is going to be extremely useful for all of them. Another thing to bear in mind is that learners should always have access to their portfolio at any stage within their learning journey as well, just because they can then see exactly what it is that's being put forward for EPA. I know a lot of the standards don't require the portfolio anymore, but on some of the newer standards that are coming in, the portfolio is going to become a requirement again, even though it may not contribute to the marks. It will form part of what the EPA is there. So making sure that the learners have active use of that portfolio and they are always aware of exactly what is contained within it is going to be a much better step for them in terms of being more involved in the process. Even though I know it's all about them and it's their qualification, but having them have access to that portfolio is going to make them a lot more involved within the whole process, and I think it in turn brings ownership of the qualification to them, as they can have an active role in that portfolio. So if there are any questions, again, please do remember to put those into the chat for us so that we can either answer them as we go along. Oh, there we go, Alexandra. Is the access to portfolio coming up, or can learner do so now? So during PD, so Alexandra, at the current moment in time, in particular for the team leader qualification, the learner can only have access to their CPD log. They can't actually have access to their whole entire portfolio. Business admin level 3, I believe it's the same for that. Zach, I believe you'll be able to clarify that for me there.
Yes, it's exactly the same on the business admin as well. Yeah.
There we are. So, Alexandra,
but they will,
at the current moment in time.
Yeah, sorry. The assessor will look at the portfolio prior to the EPA anyway, as part of the professional discussion on the business admin one. But there's nothing stopping the learner having the portfolio in front of them for the professional discussion at all.
There we go. Fantastic. Glad that's answered that for you there, Alexander.
Yeah.
There we go. So does anyone else have any other questions, or has that helped clarify things for you there?
Everyone, yeah, fantastic. Okay, cool. No, I think, Matt, we can move on. We can move on from here.
Yes.
This one. So number 5. Yeah. Okay, Matt. I think this one's yours.
Yes. So, we have done a session regarding what is a good portfolio previously there. Now, a lot of the time, because the learners don't necessarily have direct involvement, or they're more focused particularly on the active work of their particular qualification, they don't necessarily know what a good portfolio should look like. Now, just to be very brief about it here, a good portfolio should always be very clear and concise as to what evidence is there and what that evidence relates to and what it's referenced to. The referencing should always be very clear as well. And then in addition to that, a lot of the evidence you want to be, obviously holistic is best practice, but we also want those pieces of evidence to try to be as concise and complete as possible. So rather than answering a sort of set criteria over 3 or 4 sets of evidence, you would want to choose the best case scenarios for that and try and answer it wherever possible within a single piece of evidence. That's not to say that you can't have several criteria answered within one piece of evidence, but you would want to, wherever possible, have a criteria met within a single piece of evidence rather than spread across several. The reason for this being it then sort of muddies the water as to what part of that criteria is being answered where. So another thing that a learner will look at is if a portfolio is extensive, so 100 pages, that they may look at that and think, well, there's tons of stuff in there, that's great. But as far as what we're concerned, is that a good portfolio isn't necessarily a long one. A good portfolio is always going to be a portfolio that is concise and direct, without sort of, for example, if there were to be something regarding health and safety, you don't attach the whole entire health and safety document to that. You simply make reference to it, specifically where it's covered and what exactly is covered within that, rather than attaching that whole booklet as an appendices in there, which, you know, is not really best practice and not very specific with regards to answering criteria and providing clear and concise evidence for that. So does anyone have any questions regarding this?
No. Okay. Yeah. So we can sort of move on then to the next one. So I believe we're now up to reason number 4 in the top 10. Oh, we've got a question here from Alexandra. Sorry, I'm just going to pull that down. So if evidence is not attached, how is it verifiable, Matt?
Yes. So Alexandra, with this, I'll go back to the sort of the health and safety sort of question there. What we tend to find, okay, so how do we know that the health and safety doc exists? Right. So in particular, when we have, let's say, a set criteria that's asking about a set health and safety policy, what we would want to do is we would want to see clear reference to that particular document, etc. And then rather than attaching the whole booklet, we would rather have a single page or extract from that particular document, and that would be sufficient in terms of evidence for that. There's no point in looking at sort of a 70-page health and safety, or attaching a 70-page health and safety document when we're only talking about a specific criteria that could be covered within one particular policy. And realistically, if we were able to see the page where that policy is made reference to, then that would suffice for that. Particularly when the, oh, there we go, Alexandra. I'm glad that's answered that for you. I just want to add as well, that's in particular when the learner is answering the question from their own point of view and their own involvement, etc., rather than just repeating off whatever the policy might be.
Okay, thank you, Matt, and thank you, Alexandra. Alexandra there. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next one, which is, again, I'll mention this as number 4 now in the top 10. So what we're also finding is, certainly with some of the colleges and training providers coming to us, a lot of them are mentioning sort of the mock materials, either not used or sort of not up to standard, etc. And even before a college, for instance, has started working with us, I've sort of emailed out EPA toolkits, EPA guides for them to look over and sort of be happy with the material that we've produced. We do listen to a lot of the companies that we work with, certainly training providers. We do make a lot of changes to our resources to sort of meet the standards that we're expected to meet. All the materials that are produced, they're produced by people that are very experienced assessors or tutors within that particular standard. They then go off to EQA to be looked at and then signed off, and then it's only after that they are uploaded onto our Summit system, etc. So we believe we've got a good compilation here of resources for the 7 standards that we offer for EPA, and as we're going along, we're sort of learning ourselves as well, and we're presenting the resources in a different way. We're breaking them down a lot more. So it's easier for the learners and the training providers and colleges just to pick up, and they know what it's about, etc. So for the current standard that we're running at the moment, the team leader supervisor, which will run up to the 26th of June 2021, which is this standard here. We've got the toolkit there, and the EPA guide, etc. We've got a couple of videos there to sort of portray what a good professional discussion is, as opposed to a bad one. And we've got a lot of information with regards to EPA for the apprentice as well. I'm just going to open this document here very quickly. So this basically guides the apprentice. It sort of explains what the EPA looks like, and this is something that they can pick up really early on and get to grips with their endpoint assessment there. And then we've got the new assessment plan for team leader supervisor. Again, so for any learners registered on the team leader supervisor level 3 program from 26th of June this year will have to take the EPA under the new standard, which is APO 3, and they will be looking at these resources here. And you can, as I mentioned before, these are more sort of broken down now into sort of little bite-sized pieces there for them to pick up and sort of and to sort of get to grips with. And for each of the new assessment plans that we're doing resources for, so we'll be doing some for the business administration new assessment plan, and also for the ops departmental manager one as well. What we'll have is this flow chart here for you to sort of get to grips with what the timelines are like. So one change that we can see straight away is that there's no knowledge test, and then there's also a maximum 4 months for the EPA to be carried out from Gateway, etc. But this just gives a clear picture of what will sort of happen, and these flow charts are absolutely great on there. So you can sort of pick these up from the resources section there. Yeah, so we like to keep up to date with everything. Obviously, we still got this is a test site, so all these learners are sort of made up names and stuff, but we still got our knowledge tests sort of embedded within the system. And this is a learner. Well, it's a dummy learner login. And you can see on there that they sort of get a synopsis of the component, the breakdown of the grades, etc. And they can upload anything to do with their competency-based interview and professional discussion. As you can see, there's no portfolio there. That was phased out in the beginning part of 2020. So we don't submit a portfolio for team leader or ops departmental manager 5. So there is only 3 components that we take the learners through on the team leader, and only 4 components on the ops departmental manager, because there is no portfolio for the ops departmental manager as well currently. So they can pick up the mock quizzes here, and they can do these under sort of time conditions. So they'll get their question and 4 possible answers. Just going to click through a few of these. And as you can see, as I'm going along, not only is it sort of giving me the incorrect answer, it's giving me the right answer too. So for revision purposes, it's fairly good, we've been told. And there's also a quiz leaderboard there. So if you decide to work with us and you register a cohort with us, that cohort can see how everyone else is doing on the knowledge test and where they are on the leaderboard, etc. So yeah, so that's a bit about the mock test, and then we also have the resources again, which I've sort of shown you before there for the learners, which we sort of update. You can view the leaderboard from there as well, and also you can also see the number of attempts a learner's had at a knowledge test as well. And if there isn't anybody on there that you've added onto the system, this is a good way to sort of prompt them to sort of say you've not logged in, or you've not had a go at the mock knowledge test. Maybe they haven't got their login details, or something like that. But it's a good prompt to sort of just give them a nudge and just ask them to log in and take a few knowledge tests, etc. So that's just a sort of a little bit about our resources there that you can very easily pick up from the system, etc.
Just to add on top of that there, Zach, from an assessor's standpoint, it's very easy to tell the learners who have actively used the EPA Toolkit compared to the learners who haven't. It does make a substantial difference to the way in which they approach the EPAs, as well as how they tend to perform in terms of the way that they answer the questions, the level of preparation that they tend to have as well. So I always recommend to everyone and to every training provider as well that the EPA Toolkit is invaluable to yourselves and something that, as far as I've seen anyway, is unparalleled in terms of support.
Yeah, I just on the back of that, Matt. Thank you, Alexandra, there for the comment, because we work very closely with Alexandra's learners in terms of putting through EPA. So they've had experience of she's had experience of using the toolkits, and that's very good feedback from her. So again, a lot of information there with regards to the EPA. Breaks the components down, tells you what the EPA looks like, and then we've got a couple of mapping documents here. Firstly, by learning outcome, and then we've got a key at the bottom here just to sort of say which component relates to which learning outcome there, and then we've got another mapping document here, and this is by component, and again it clearly shows which learning outcomes are related to which EPA component then, and then it's got the criteria reference there for the knowledge, skills, and behaviours. So you can see clearly what's related to which component and which learning outcome, and then this is further broken down here. So we're seeing here the first learning outcome, leading people. Both the knowledge test and the structured competency-based interview is related to this learning outcome, and then we can see the breakdown of the criteria of what needs to be covered, and a bit of guidance there. So as Alexandra has mentioned, really good toolkits which are broken down and easy for the learner to sort of digest, so to speak. And again, we sort of encourage learners to be registered onto the system pretty early on, so they can pick these resources up and read through them. And if you have any questions, then certainly they can come back to us, etc.
There we go. Did anyone have any further questions?
Another question. Yeah, that's great. Okay, brilliant. So we'll move on to the next one. Matt, I think this is probably a good one for you.
I believe this is. Yes, so I believe this is. I would say I believe this is the third most common problem that we have here, Zach. Yes, is that right?
Number 3, yeah, we're down to number 3, yeah.
Yeah. So, and the main reason that this makes it into our top 3 of the 10 biggest mistakes here is the amount of learners that I've had come through who have been nervous. And I have to say that a nervous learner does not shine nearly as brightly as a learner who is confident in themselves. A lot of the time, the nerves will get in the way of the learner with regards to expanding on their answers and expanding on their experiences. Especially in the professional discussion, a nervous learner is very reluctant to sort of talk on or add extra information in there. I do find as well with the competency-based interviews as well, and project presentations, if the learner is nervous, it's very hard for them to display some of the sort of skills and behaviors that you would like to see from them. So they tend to be very reluctant in being definitive with their answers. They also tend to be very short with their answers, which again leads to other problems. So I can't recommend enough that learners do sort of mock interviews and professional discussions with another tutor, even if it's just once, just to break that ice, it will honestly make the world of difference for a learner. Because whenever I have a learner come through who is a confident and prepared learner, it's extremely apparent, and they're able to give that extra level of information by being confident in their own abilities and what they're doing, compared to a learner who's nervous and who's unsure what sort of answer to give, or they're unsure about their own performance and so on. So this is a particular problem that we experience on a very regular basis. Admittedly, some learners are just generally nervous people, but they can be coached and they can be supported to overcome those nerves, and that is invaluable when it comes to time for the EPA itself. Does anyone have any questions regarding this? Or if anyone would like to add in the chat section there, anything that they do with their learners.
Just one thing to add here also, Matt, is as an EPAO, we do offer we do offer a practical session to the colleges and training providers with their tutors to do maybe a role play of a professional discussion or a structured competency-based interview, which we can then record and then just send back to them for them to go through with their learner as well. So we're up to that as well. Just ask us that you want to do it, and we'll set something up. The companies that are working with us, the colleges and stuff, they're finding this really invaluable exercise. So we're not only about just giving you reams and reams of paper. There's a lot of collaboration behind that, and there is a lot of support, and we will do whatever we're allowed to do within our limits of being an EPAO. We will sort of exercise that to the extent so which is we are allowed to do these mock professional discussions and structured competency-based interviews, as long as it's not with the learner. It's fine. If it's with a tutor or an assessor, internal assessor, etc., then we can do those. We can record them and then we can send them over.
Yes, certainly. Another thing I would also like to add in there for everyone, obviously, as independent endpoint assessors and as a group, we do aim to put the learners at ease as much as possible. But again, doing this before the time is always going to be much more beneficial. As Zach says, this is something that we can facilitate. Obviously, we still have to be impartial, so we can't do it directly with the learners, but we can coach your staff in terms of how to accomplish this. And in the chat, if anyone has seen it there, Alexandra has also made reference again to our toolkit, which is another great resource that you can use to structure your own sort of mock EPAs, because obviously it gives you a very exact breakdown of how the EPA is due to run as well.
Brilliant. Okay, so now I believe we're moving on to number 2. Here we are. Matt, do you want to take this one, or do you want me to sort of?
If you want to start off with that, yeah, Zach.
So assessment planning meeting. Again, with the current standards that we're running at the moment, we're finding that the change management elements are explained pretty well to the learners when they're going through Gateway and coming up to EPA. They're being prepped very well, and we're lucky to be working with such organisations. But moving forward, certainly when the new assessment plans are out, this is something that we will be looking to implement straight after Gateway. So whether it's just a little 10-minute or a 15-minute webinar with the learner, just to sort of explain to them the process of the EPA. This will happen straight after they've cleared Gateway, and just sort of find out whether they've got any health and safety concerns, or whether they need any sort of special considerations or reasonable adjustments, etc. And we'll just go through and just explain what the EPA looks like. Really, the independent endpoint assessor will take this call with them. We can do it collectively with a number of learners. We don't need to do it one by one. So we could have up to 10 learners on the webinar, and it's merely just going through a form, different questions, and sort of just sort of explaining what the EPA looks like, etc. So so that's what the assessment planning meeting sort of will look like. But as mentioned prior, the change management elements are explained very, very well from everybody that we're working with, which is a delight. And needless to say, the learners are sort of they're sort of breezing through EPA. I think certainly with one of the clients that we're working with, I think we're up to about 165 learners with them, and they're all brilliant. They're all of a very good standard, and they're just breezing through. So but we will implement an assessment planning meeting in the new standards going forward. Matt?
Yeah. So just to add to this, I immediately with particular learners who haven't read through the toolkit, when they start their EPA, obviously, as independent assessors, we always explain to them exactly what the process is going to be for the day. And those of them who haven't read the toolkit or used the toolkit don't have that understanding, and it tends to be the first time that they come across this. So with the assessment planning meeting with the learners, it's going to make a substantial difference in terms of they have an exact idea of what's going to be happening. In addition to that, it could also be that it wouldn't be the first time that they're meeting someone like myself. They're able to meet me during the planning meeting. So when it comes time to the EPA, they can put a face to the name, and they do recognize and don't have that sort of nervousness of, oh, this is the first time I'm dealing with this person.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Thank you for that, Matt. And then that leads us to the number one position and the number one reason, really, as to why learners are not getting their expected marks, or again, why they're getting passes as opposed to sort of distinctions. And I'm very familiar with this one. This one comes up quite a lot. And really, it's been one of our, as an EPAO, it's been one of our strengths, really, that we are able to give a learner a date for their EPA within 10 working days of them clearing Gateway. And then we are also able to mark that EPA assessment again with a further 10 working days, and have it IV'd and have all the results sort of posted on the system. Again, this has been one of our strengths, but we've sort of heard some very nightmare stories where learners are not being able to get EPA dates for 2 months apart from component to component. Yeah, but it's worked well for us because we've had a lot of colleges and training providers come to us, and we've been able to sort of eliminate that wait, so to speak. And we are in the midst of a pandemic, but even having said that, we've still sort of been able to maintain the 10 working days for an EPA component to be booked, and then a further 10 working days for it to be marked and IV'd. We've sort of still come within there or thereabouts. We've come in sort of within those timelines. So what we're really saying is within a month. Within a month, really, everything's sort of worst case scenario. The learner would have their results sort of posted on the system, etc., and we would have applied for the certificate from the ESFA. So that's sort of one of our strengths, really. Matt, do you have anything to sort of add on to this at all?
Yes, certainly. I've got quite a bit here. So, in practice, when we've had training providers come to us from other EPAs with the problem, and I do very well. Immediately when I'm dealing with learners who have had long wait times, all the sort of situations or scenarios that they would have otherwise have dealt with, months previously, aren't as fresh in their mind, and it does get to a point where some learners can be negatively affected by the long wait times that they've suffered through others there. And that's one of the reasons why we aim to have such good turnaround times, is because we know that not only from yourselves as providers it's very helpful for you, but it's also extremely beneficial for the learners, because there's no point in going through Gateway and then not doing the EPA for weeks or months at a time. An analogy I could give for this is, you pass your driving test, but then don't get into a car for a couple of months. That's a recipe for disaster right there. So it's exactly the same for the EPA process. We know that as soon as Gateway is hit, we want to get those learners through as soon as possible, to make sure that one, that information is as fresh as possible, but two, they're not stagnating within the learning process, and we don't have bad examples pushing through. So that's one of the things that both Zach and I have had direct experience of there, particularly when taking learners over. And I have to say that the sooner the turnaround times, which is what we do, the better the learners perform as well.
Yeah. Okay, good, excellent. So that was the that's our sort of top 10, so to speak, for sort of the 10 biggest mistakes that cause EPA failure. Has anybody got any questions, or can anybody sort of think of maybe something else, or something they might want to add, or something that they feel that we might have missed out maybe at all? You can just sort of write it in the sort of chat box.
We would also like to hear from everyone. Are there any questions or topics that you would possibly like to see in future webinars from ourselves?
Well, having come on to that, that's a good question, but having come on to that, I know my colleague Janet Glentworth, she's currently preparing the presentation for the January webinar, which will be a discussion on the new assessment plan for the Operations Departmental Manager Level 5. So that will certainly be the January topic that we'll sort of go through. The new assessment plan for Ops Departmental Manager, that was introduced on the 21st of October of this year. yeah. So there's certainly that. But so yeah, okay. Project guidance for Management 5. Yeah. So that will be included, Alexandra, within the January webinar. Janet will give project guidance for the Management 5 project on that one as well. Brilliant. So I think we're sort of there, or sort of thereabouts, and I don't think anyone's got any questions or any comments. Excellent. Okay. Right. So that will be the January webinar. So hopefully we can all sort of go away. We can have a safe Christmas and a safe New Year, and hopefully, with all being well, we'll send the invites out to the January webinar very soon, and look forward to sort of seeing you all on there. Really, it'll be it'll be great. Excellent. So thank you for everybody for attending.
Yes, thank you everyone for attending, and thank you very much for your questions as well.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you. Thanks very much. Okay. Cheers. Okay. Thank you, Matt. Cheers. Bye now. Bye now, everybody. Bye-bye.
Yes. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.